Welcome back to the Raptors 905 podcast, Savanna Hamilton. Of course, there's Charles Kissy again. But Charles, you know our guest that we have on today's show, Rayhan Malik. What do you know about him?
Rehan is a super talented athletic therapist for the Raptors 905, also does some work with the Toronto Raptors. And I'm excited to talk to him and kind of get the behind the scenes inside scoop, another sort of view of the game from his perspective.
Absolutely. Well, without further ado, as you say, let's bring him on. Joining us now is Rayhan Malik, who's the head athletic therapist for the Raptors 905. Malik, you are a familiar face to me. I was trying to put my finger on it. I was like, I don't know where I know him from, but I know it's beyond just 905. And I think that's because you also worked at Ryerson a little bit, but we will get there. I think we'll get there in a minute. Thanks for joining us on the podcast.
Thank you for allowing me to be here. I'm excited to kind of join you guys and answer whatever questions you may have.
I'll start with this. We called you Rayhan, but we should be calling you Doctor. It pains me, by the way, to say this. Maybe let's start with a little bit of your journey on your way to becoming said doctor.
Well, doctor is going to be soon. I'm in a doctorate program at the moment. I think I got like 2 more years left before I can officially call myself doctor. But when I do, you're going to be the first person I call. You have to address me as doctor. But yeah, so I did my undergraduate degree at York University in kinesiology. From there, I did like a postgraduate program in athletic therapy, also at York University, which allowed me to kind of do a bunch of like placements, which one of them was at Ryerson. And from there, I went and did a master's at the University of St. Augustine. Kind of did a bunch of like certifications along the way, and now I am in a doctorate of education with specialization in athletic training. So working my way through that, grinding it through.
Moving on up. Well, congrats, because that's like no easy feat. You just say it so casually, just listen off like the resume right there. But I mean, all that takes a lot of studying on top of all the experience that you've had to gain as well, like just being there in basketball games, ready to react. And as a former athlete myself who played at Ryerson, hence why I recognize your face.
Yeah.
I have so much appreciation for what athletic therapists have to do.
Yeah, no, it's a grind to kind of get to where, at that professional level or whatever it might be. But it's fun, it's enjoyable, and it's rewarding to see athletes return back to play after they're getting hurt.
Ray, talk about how you got into basketball, because we've worked together obviously with the 905, and we always. I think a lot of people would have heard by now about these staff runs we have. One thing people don't know about Ray is that he doesn't play any defense whatsoever.
Wow.
But no, I'll say it because the people need to know. This is important. But he'll take every shot. He has never seen a shot that he doesn't like. Okay, that's Rayhan right there. But talk about where your love of basketball came and how you sort of navigated into the seat that you're in.
Well, to touch on that, I do make majority of the shots I do take, so it's.
Okay, can we stop? He's the kind of guy that will hit a shot if you challenge it really, really hard, but nobody ever does because he doesn't typically make them. You know what I mean? Anyway, carry on.
He's pulling it from half court, eh?
I'm just saying, when we had a staff run, people asked Charles to switch because he couldn't guard me anymore. So I'll leave it at that. But
wow. Okay.
Yeah, like I kind of fell in love with the game of basketball very early on, like public school, and really thought I was going to make the NBA, and realized that I probably wasn't. And I just kind of wanted to figure out a way to still be involved in basketball. And the funny thing is, I think I was in grade 10 or grade 11. I went into Google and I typed in NBA jobs, and I looked down the list and I said, oh, what can I do? And I found out that every team had like an athletic therapist on staff. And I was like, okay, I'm going to try to do this and try to make my way through it, and enrolled in kinesiology, and then realized it's probably really hard to kind of get there. But I networked as much as I could, and yeah, kind of found myself in this position, and I'm very grateful for it.
I mean, grades, they speak volumes too when you're going into like a field of really health and science. But like what stuck out then to you with athletic therapy? Because there is like so many positions available for basketball. There's coordination, there's event day, there's media, there's so much other stuff, but you chose therapy.
I think for some reason the whole like healthcare field fascinated me. I took like exercise science in grade 12, and I think that was the reason why I kind of continued that pathway. And I was good at science. I was terrible at math, and I just knew that I couldn't go that business route. I thought about coaching, to be honest, but I just didn't see myself being that like vocal presence in a gym to be able to kind of tell people what to do. But yeah, it just kind of went that way. I've got hurt, throughout, me being a kid and just doing silly things. And it just like kind of fascinated me for the human body to be able to recover and kind of be back to normal.
What was that? I wanted to dive into some of those silly things, but your mom's probably shaking her fist at you.
Yeah.
What are some of those? What was that break? What was that moment that sort of propelled you over the edge and said, "Yes, this is it"?
I mean, I've broken bones. One incident, I was at home. I had a mini net. I tried to do a 360 windmill, and my hand hit the doorknob, and I cracked my two of my metacarpals. And I came downstairs, and I'm like, "Mom, I think I broke my hand." And I was laughing. I think I was just in shock. And she's like, "Are you serious? Like, are you like joking, or do you need to go to the hospital?" I'm like, I need to go to the hospital. I broke my hand, and I went to the hospital, did all that kind of stuff. Um, and I went to like a physio appointment in the hospital, and they kind of did like range of motion exercises. And then I kind of was picking their brain in terms of like how they got there. I think that was the one that kind of made like, oh, I kind of want to do this. And I wonder what it would be like at an NBA level or a professional level, and how much different it would be, and how cool that would be. And I think that was probably the breaking point to kind of figure out like, okay, I do want to go this route, and now I also want to go the NBA route and trying to like meet them together.
I was gonna say the breaking point when you broke your hand.
Yeah, yeah, exactly.
I want to ask, before you got to the 905,
Yep.
what was the moment of I'm so happy that I'm doing what I'm doing. I'm so happy I chose this field.
I think my placement at Ryerson.
Oh, good
Yeah.
answer.
Again, I fell into basketball in that role too. Like, so the way it worked is you kind of got put into different positions. And for the external placements outside of York, you had to apply. So I interviewed with the head therapist at that time, or I think he's still there, Jerome, and I'm sure you know who he is. And yeah, interview with him, and I told him, I'm interested in coming, but I only want to do basketball. And if it's not basketball, I maybe go elsewhere. And I guess he liked me and gave me the opportunity, and got the chance to work under Roy Rana, and that opened up a lot of doors as well. And yeah, it was from there. In that moment, I was like, wow, I really do like basketball, and I want to continue in it and kind of go as far as I can.
Yo, all the athletes at Ryerson, we talk about the therapists and if they're good or not, eh? Just so you know.
Oh,
I'm sure
really?
you already know. Oh, yeah. Oh, we did. We talk so much crap. And especially, like, oh, this Rayhan dude. Oh, no, I'm kidding. Literally every guy loved you. I remember, like, the guys
Really?
on the team, on the men's team, just telling, like, how, like, yo, he's quiet, but, like, he's good. Like, he's good. So I think it was mutual. I think Jerome made the right choice with
Yeah,
bringing you on. So shout out to Jerome there.
yeah. Big shout out to Jerome.
Did you work on JV and everything?
I did JV, Jamal, Bjorken, like a whole bunch of these guys.
Yeah,
Yeah,
all the guys. And it's funny because JV later on played for 905 or at least got some
he did.
practice reps in with them.
He did. Yeah. So it's always nice to connect with these guys afterwards.
Rayhan, I wanted to give a shout out to Roy Rana, who I know you know and has helped you, but will be attending the Olympics with the German national team. So shout out to Roy. Talk about how you got to the 905. Like, what was the connection? What was the link? And why did you want to get there?
You know what? I was like always looking for positions in around the league to kind of get my foot into the door. I made an effort to kind of connect with people. through social media, LinkedIn, and all that kind of stuff. And people were very helpful and kind of like giving me exposure, whether it was like attend a practice or come down for a couple of days just to kind of shadow. Um, and you know what? The 905 posting just got, it was on Indeed. I submitted an application. Roy was one of my references. Um, I think they called him as a reference during my second interview because he claims that he got me the job. But I don't know for sure. But yeah, it was everything kind of lined up perfectly and fit into place. And yeah, like I said, I'm extremely grateful, and it just kind of happened. And there was no real like somebody said, "Hey, we're gonna send your information over." I applied like any normal person, kind of just worked out for me.
That's like rare to hear, to be honest. Like, I feel like it's always a connection through a connection or something like that. So when you say like I apply it online, it's like there's
Yeah,
hope
yeah,
to just like cold calling and cold emailing and stuff like that. But that's
yeah.
also like a testament to like, like not giving up, really.
Mhm.
You also worked for NBA Summer League just casually. What was that experience
It,
like?
it was good. I am going to be doing my now fourth summer league coming up in August. And I always look forward to it. You know, people are always over Vegas, especially with being there for so long. I'm so fresh into the game, so I love it. I love being part of it, and it's a cool way to kind of see some of the younger prospects. And it's it's hectic, but it's also a lot of fun because you get a lot of like downtime and you get to explore Vegas. And yeah, it's an awesome experience. And the Raptors give me the opportunity to kind of like run the show down there. And again, super grateful for that, and it really helps me kind of like grow and get better.
So you've had a lot of really neat opportunities with the Raptors, right? From 905, but you also
Yep.
get to spend time with the Raptors themselves, right? Like, so you're kind of back and forth. What's
Yep.
that like, and how valuable, important is working with Alex McKechnie? Like, what is that sort of mentorship like? Alex McKechnie, sports science doctor for the
Yeah. Yeah.
Toronto Raptors. I don't even know what his title is now. I think he's the vice president of,
Yep.
well, like you, and we'll get to that in a second. But talk about what that's like, and what that experience is like, having both ends, working with
Mhm.
athletes who are trying to get there and athletes who are there.
No, it's awesome. Like, you know, I express my growth to Alex, and kind of laid out my 5-year plan with him at the beginning when I first got hired. And obviously, my goal is to eventually be at the NBA level. And he's given the opportunity to get exposure and potentially get up there eventually. And yeah, he's been awesome. Like, once the 905 season's over, I'll join the Raptors, and kind of work with their team. I'll be a part of their summer program, so we'll do player visits. We'll have some camps in LA, summer league, and then I'll join them for training camp usually before our season starts. So it's awesome because I get to go into 905 and kind of do my own thing and work and kind of experiment a little bit and see what works and what doesn't. And then I go to the Raptors and kind of get mentored by him and work with him. And he's been around the league for X amount of years, and it's awesome picking his brain and getting exposure from him as well.
Wait, what do you mean by you get to experiment with what works and what doesn't work in the medical field? I'm like very concerned and
Well,
You
intrigued
you,
at the
you
same
had a
time.
lot of listeners just
Yeah,
perk up and say, experiment. What does he
Whoa.
mean?
not so
What
much
you be doing to me?
not so much experiment per se, but I'll get to try new things,
Hmm.
in the sense of like new exercises, um, you know, new like recovery techniques, whatever it might be. Obviously, I'll get consent from these guys prior, but yeah, it's usually a good way to kind of see what works and what doesn't.
Okay. I just had to double check there. I don't know about Kissy, but I was like, whoa.
He treated me once. I ended up treating myself. That's a whole nother story. But
Oh,
talk about talk about the it's a year-round job. I mean, for those that don't know,
Yeah,
it's not like the season's in, it's the off season and you get one too, right? It's a year-round job. And you kind of touched on, visits, player visits, summer league, then right back into the regular season. Talk a little bit about what that's like, some of the neat, because it is kind of cool. You're traveling, you're doing some different things, but it's also a lot on you.
yeah.
What's that balance like, for you both personally and professionally?
Yeah, I think the Raptors organization does a really good job in terms of like giving time off whenever you need it. There's obviously times where you may be offered 2 weeks and they may call you and say, hey, we need you to go do this. But they are very flexible. And our medical staff is pretty big enough where we can kind of like change things on the fly if we need to. And we all work really well together. So that's another plus to our organization and our team. Um, but you're right. Like there's obviously a lot of sacrifices that you have to make. Weddings you have to miss, friends' birthdays. But the good thing for me is, my friends and my family are super supportive of my career, and they understand that I have to miss some things. And sometimes they have the opportunity to come see me, and that's a cool little incentive of kind of like coming out to Vegas or Tampa or whatever it might be.
I love that. I love that, and that's a pretty good perk. Whenever you get to travel to some cool places, I mean, sometimes yeah, it's for work at the end of the day, but you're still traveling, getting some
Yeah.
experiences that a lot of people don't get. I kind of want to dive into how you hustled the system, and you went from an associate trainer to now the head of the athletic therapy. So how did that all unfold? How did you work your way up?
That's a great word, Savannah. Hustled the system. I love
Hustle the
that.
system.
It so
Scheming.
accurately describes what happened here. Go ahead, describe it for us,
That's
Doc.
exactly what I did. Yeah, no, I, there was a position with the Salt Lake City Stars, which is G League team, and it was like an associate position. It was almost like an internship. Associate just sounds cool. That's why I also wrote it on my resume. But it was an opportunity that was, I think it lasted like 3 months or something. But I was working at Mount Allison University, which was in Sackville, New Brunswick. So I was living out there for a while, and got the opportunity to interview. Did the interview, everything worked out, but it was just like the visa issue, with me being Canadian. So I ended up just they had showcase in Toronto, so I ended up shadowing the Salt Lake City Stars for the duration of showcase, um, and then kind of just did a couple of visits here and there to Salt Lake, where I kind of just again shadowed a little bit, um, to kind of fulfill the requirements of the internship, and then from there, continue to kind of build my like network. And yeah, I was working at a clinic, a sport oriented clinic, and I started I think 2 weeks into it, and I think like I applied to the 905 position just for the sake of applying. 2 weeks in, I filled my patient load, and I get a call saying, "Oh, we want you to come for an interview." I was like, "Okay, I'll go for an interview." Went to the interview, did a second interview, and then I got a call saying, "Yeah, you got the job. We need you to come to Vegas like this weekend." And I'm like, I didn't know how to say no. I was super ecstatic. I was like, "Yeah, I'll be there." And I had to call my workplace and say, "Yeah, I got like 12 people I need to see, but I'm going to Vegas." And I think I just got a job with the Raptors. And the guy was super supportive about it. And yeah, he kind of managed everything, and it just kind of went that way. Yeah, it happened really fast. It's hard to like remember, like really remember what happened, because I was just super excited to be, you know, in that position.
That's wild. Like you're already working for a clinic, life is going well. Clearly you're talented because you're like booked up right away and everything. People already want to see you, and then boom, you get that call up, and then you can't say no. You
Yeah,
literally can't.
exactly.
That's awesome. Wow. Jeez.
So you're known in the league. Well, you should be in the league anyway, but certainly for us, as having great relationships with players,
Mhm.
right? And as an athletic trainer, we often think about that. Let's go back. As a coach, you often think about that as being so important. How important is that for you as a therapist, building those relationships?
I think it's very important, and I realized that over time. Um, my experience working at Ryerson, and being a little bit younger and kind of connecting with them, I realized how much of importance that had. Um, and that goes to the professional level too. Some of these guys see you every single day, and they have a lot to talk about. And I think as a therapist, you have to understand what to share and what not to share, and building that trust with that player. And I think that goes a long way in terms of them being honest and truthful to you, about how they're feeling. And I think just in general, how they're feeling goes a lot into play in terms of how they respond to certain movement patterns or certain exercises, and also from like a return to play standpoint. And then you also get to kind of get a feel for how they actually are, and you kind of build this personal connection with them, which is really cool. And then they have so much more trust in you when you're able to do that.
On that like note, how, because we talk about, especially what has come to the forefront like way more in recent years, has been mental health and the game of basketball. You know, with you being on the more physical therapy, the more athletic therapy side, how much does the mental health aspect tie in just directly to the physical side of the game that you've seen in your experience?
Personally, I think it's huge. I think mental health has a huge component to an individual recovering, and having like a positive mindset can play a huge role in terms of somebody returning back to sport. There's more and more research that's coming out, more and more apps like Headspace and Calm that people are using, and I try to implement that into our practice. I know Charles and I work together to kind of implement that, whether it's 5 minutes or 10 minutes, and we noticed a significant change in some of the just attitudes and behaviors of some people.
Does that have like a physical like result then to it? Like with a positive mindset, typically they heal or recover faster, or is it kind of like maybe not quite the same correlation, but
Yeah, I think like, obviously when you get hurt in basketball, it's your job per se, and you're not doing your job and you're stressing about, not being on court and not being able to help your team. And just like easing that and letting them know like everything's going to be okay, and I usually get coaches involved to kind of get them involved. So they're not just sitting at practice, they're engaged, they're watching practice, or if they can, they'll do like some ball handling stuff in a chair, some form shooting, anything to give him that ability to touch a basketball again, because that makes things enjoyable. And I'll ask them, where do you see your goals to be, and where do you see yourself and what you want to do? And I think that goes a long way as well.
okay.
So where do you see your goals? Where's Rayhan in
Um,
Ooh.
5 years besides doctor? Yeah, yeah. What else? Where do we
uh,
see Rayhan in 5 years?
So the police
I
coming
wouldn't
out.
say I have like a I wouldn't say I have a particular timeline, but like I said, I would eventually want to kind of get to the NBA level and kind of work my way up. Um, I would like to see myself kind of in that Alex role, um, and that's what I'm striving for. And yeah, like I understand, like the NBA is a game of business as well, and sometimes they make changes based off injuries and whatever it might be. But um, I'm grateful to be put in this position at an early age, and I will continue to kind of strive to be at the highest level I can possibly get to.
When you see injuries happening in these playoffs, I would love to hear your thoughts on this actually, because this past year has been pretty injury ridden.
Mm.
Obviously, the Raptors are not a part of this, so
Yep.
I'm sure you're free to speak candidly if you'd like. Um, but I watched Giannis's hyperextension, and like with the context of all these other athletes, stars going down with injuries, I'm like, it really, really is like, no, 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 please, not another one. How do you react when you see an injury replay slow mo 1,000 times? But then also in the greater scheme of things, this past year and why we've seen so many injuries as a result.
Um, Loaded question, but
Double,
I'll,
like double
I'll
whammy.
yeah, I'll answer the last one first. I think the amount of injuries happened because obviously the pandemic kind of, you know, paused the basketball for an extended period of time. And I know teams obviously, could do whatever they could from a pandemic standpoint, whether it was getting equipment to players, um, or working with them through Skype or Zoom or whatever it might be. But I think the fact that they were away from basketball for so long, and then the NBA kind of coming together, and this is no discredit to the NBA, but they just kind of condensed their schedule a little bit. And with COVID as well, it didn't make things a lot easier. So the amount of injuries just increased, just because if guys got COVID and they were sitting up for 2 weeks, they weren't allowed to do any form of physical activity either. So they had to sit out, and then guys wanted to return back to play. So, medical staff had to kind of be diligent enough to figure out, okay, what's a proper return to play for these individuals. And the unfortunate truth was there's no real research out there to show this is the right way to go about things. We were kind of figuring it out on the fly, and maybe down the road we'll figure out what some of the research showed. I am very research based, so I like to rely on that as a form of something, and Charles knows that very. He can maybe speak on that, but yeah, I think that's kind of why a lot of the injuries kind of happen. Is just we didn't have enough information to kind of like gauge on how to deal with these certain situations. And then we also, teams want to win. Coaches are want their players to play and whatever it might be. So that I think that in a nutshell is why. I mean, there's obviously more things, but I'll leave it at that because I could probably talk about this for hours.
I mean, that's what we're here for. We got all the time. But I wanted to like go back to my other. I gave you like a double question there, so
Yeah,
I'll go
what
back
was
to
the
the
first
other
one?
one. The first one was, what's your reaction when you do see injuries like a
Mm.
hyperextension or like a bad ankle roll? Are you grossed out like me, where I'm like, oh, don't show me again, or are you more like, wow, like so the angle of his like knee twisting this way? I wonder if that do you go into therapy mode right away?
I do, and everyone finds it so weird that I do it. Like I'll be around my friends and I'll pull it up on Twitter and watch it in slow mo and try to like decipher like what's going on. And like our medical staff will send it to each other, and we'll be like, "Oh, what do you think?" type of thing. And yeah, it's weird for us to do that, but yeah, I'm always fascinated to see that as well.
Good to know. That's I mean, you will miss me with those injuries in the group chat, but I mean, I expect that, I guess, from a group of therapists, athletic therapists.
Yeah.
I have a question just to kind of piggyback on Savannah's in terms of how did you feel? So right now, the NBA Finals, we have the Bucks and the Suns.
Hmm.
Obviously, the Suns are a really good team, but the Final Four from last year are all gone, right? Um, how did this shortened season? I mean, I guess it's kind of the same answer you've already given. Impact, right? Or do you think there was an impact? There's no way to really say, but um, no Celtics, no Lakers, no Heat, right? All sort of relatively bounced out early. Did
Yep.
that extension, that shortened break? Uh, Obviously, you can't say yes, it did or it didn't, but it was,
Yeah.
is it likely that it played a factor in that? And then with that said, my second part is there's so much talk about players taking breaks. You talk about load management, you get into those types of things. How real is it? I mean, explain it to people in the sense that, and I'm putting you out there, but I
Yeah.
know from my perspective, it's hard to play a game, get on a flight, turn around the next night, different time zone, whatever it might be, all these different factors that impact sleep, all these different things that impact performance. From your standpoint, talk about, maybe the playoff situation now, and then into the idea of load management, guys not playing backs to backs, where we're saying, there's a lot of criticism of those players for not playing a back to back. But maybe get into a little bit of the rationale. No one specific because you can't speak on other players, but
Yeah.
just
Yeah.
the idea in general.
Yeah. Well, in terms of the playoffs, it's probably likely that the shortened season probably had something to do with, um, you know, performance or injuries or whatever it might be. It's hard to really pinpoint what it could be because I think there's a lot of factors in play. I think one of the big ones is probably teams that probably dealt with COVID and how many of their athletes actually got it, because I think that affected records and everything else. Um, but yeah, I think, you know, there's so many factors to consider. And obviously, the pandemic and everything else is probably to blame, um, along with everything else. And in regards to your second question, which is, what was it again? Remind me.
You spent so much time
Low.
dodging my first question that you didn't want to, that you forgot the second
You're
question. But
really
the
putting me
second
on the
question,
spot
I
here.
am putting you on the spot. No, but the second question is just around the idea of load management. I think I'm looking at the fact that people just get criticized so heavily for taking a day off or for whatever. And I think sometimes we forget that that's their job. They're athletes. They work under
Yep.
stress. Yeah, they don't work 9 to 5, Monday to Friday, but there's a lot there too. And maybe from your end, you can touch on that and
Yeah.
talk about what that looks like.
So I think from a load management standpoint, they, I think everyone has criticism because, their stars aren't playing, or they pay for tickets and they don't play and they get upset and they want to say, oh, he's soft or whatever it might be. But I think we have to value, healthcare providers working in the field to make those decisions and say they're making the right decisions, not only for the player, for the team, but also for the organization as a whole. And I think from a long-term perspective, the reason load management probably happens is because there's some sort of pathology that that player is dealing with, like some form of injury, whether it's chronic or acute, that we're making those decisions for that player to sit out. Um, I can't really answer to the fact of which players are sitting out and why they're sitting out, but it comes down to whatever they're dealing with. We're making sound decisions to why they're going to sit out, and whether it's back to backs, or if it's anything else. Um, yeah, I
I
believe that.
think no, I think that's good, and I think that's important for people to hear
Yeah,
because we just assume that the players not want to play or whatever other terms. I don't want to use any other language,
yeah,
but we criticize them for not being able to play, but we're always forgetting the fact that trained professional, soon to be doctor here is making those decisions
exactly.
based on something concrete. That's more than just, and sometimes, hey, by the way, rest is enough, right? Like sometimes they need rest too, right?
Yeah,
So I just think that's an important factor to sort of put out there.
yeah. And to add to that, recovery is becoming more and more important in the league, especially with games being so close together and from travel perspective. So that probably plays into some of the reasons why some players sit out.
Wow, a doctor's opinion is actually valid? What? Since when?
Right?
No. I'd much rather go on Facebook and get all my information. Duh.
Google.
Exactly. Nah, I appreciate you saying that, and like it's kind of funny because one of my parents, my mom works in the medical field as well, and everybody thinks there's the experts when they did not go to school for this. They're not making the final call. So, and not to mention like if you are an athlete, only you know your body. Like if something doesn't feel right, you have to vocalize, and if you don't, at the end of the day, that's almost on you.
Yeah.
But so I appreciate you saying all that. I wanna get the attention back on you, back on your career. So give us the whole spiel. You mentioned some highlights, but what is the biggest highlight for you? But then also, what was the most difficult or challenging time for you in this field?
Biggest highlight was being a part of the Raptors when they won in 2019. Super
Hey.
exciting. I got the chance to kind of be on that bus while we all went around, and it was super cool to be a part of that. And yeah, the amount of people is nuts. And to think that that happened after everything that's happening with the pandemic, it's crazy to think. Sometimes I'll be scrolling through my phone to find videos, and I'm like, I can't believe I was a part of this. It was pretty exciting. Biggest challenge, or I think my first year was probably my biggest challenge, just kind of getting like acclimated into like the sport of basketball at a professional level. My first year, I stayed at the team hotel, which is a Sandman. They kind of put me there from a housing standpoint, and because I lived in Markham originally, so the trek would have been long, especially with the amount of hours you put in. I had Jerry Stackhouse as my first coach. Shout out to Jerry Stackhouse, but he was he had 2 days every day. It wasn't training camp; it was for the whole season, and it was long days. And I was kind of getting accustomed to not only doing like head athletic training stuff, but it was like administrative stuff, but also like making sure guys were okay, making sure, they're healthy, returning back to play, and like implementing, strength and conditioning things as well. So it was very busy for me. And then it was hard for me to kind of like figure out, okay, this is work, this is my normal life. And most of it was just work. And yeah, like I barely saw my family, I barely saw my friends, and it took me a while to really get accustomed to that and figure out like a real balance. But that was probably the biggest
It
challenge.
is a grind, as they say, right? The G
Yeah.
League in general. What are some of the well, I know there's quite a few, but maybe talk about your favorite major differences between the G League and the NBA as far
Um,
as your work.
my work, I don't think there's much difference from my work per se, but I think the biggest difference I noticed being able to like sit front bench is the speed of basketball. I think the speed is much higher at the NBA level. And I will say that the G League is getting a lot better, though. I think talent wise, especially this past year, the bubble, I felt like the talent was like at an all time high. And there were a lot of guys who probably could play in the NBA. And that's really cool to see. And I think it's going to continue to progress that way.
I love that. Interesting. Yeah, like I feel like as media, as we cover the game, like it's only growing, it's only getting better. There's new levels to it, as Coach Kissy over there, CEBL over there, Guelph Nighthawks. But it all kind of adds up to more developmental programs, and I mean I cover women's basketball as too, so like I'm slowly seeing this translate as well on the women's side. But I guess I want to ask kind of like a silly question, but this is what I'm here for.
Yeah.
If you weren't doing athletic therapy, what would you be doing?
I'm not sure. You know what? I actually almost became a police officer. Uh,
Whoa!
yeah. I was working at the CNE and I was trying to figure things out. And I spoke to a police officer and they were telling me how they made like 50 an hour being at the CNE, like off paid hours, off duty hours. Got his phone number and I scheduled like a, what's it called? Like a, when you ride along,
Right along.
ride along. So I scheduled a ride along and for some reason I didn't go. I don't know why. I woke up that morning, I'm like, I don't feel like going. And like he didn't really message me to say, hey, are you coming or anything? And if he did, I probably would have went. But he didn't. And I just didn't go that route. So maybe I would be a police officer. I'll be a corrupt cop like Charles.
Wow. Wow.
Oof! Oof! Shots
Unbelievable.
fired.
So shots fired. Just for those that don't know, he's Ray and I have this ongoing back and forth feud that stems from multiple years ago, probably the day I saw his face. But anyway, that's where we are. And to all the police officers out there working your butt off, shout outs to you too. Ray, we know you like to eat. You're a food guy. When we go on the road, Ray is the guy who usually has the spot. What are some of your favorite food spots, and what cities are some of your favorite cities to travel?
Ooh, Maine. Maine is a great city. I think they have like the most amount of restaurants per capita or something like that, right? If I think that's
It's ridiculous. Portland, Maine's got
yeah.
tons of bars and food and
Yeah, I remember we went to that. We had some really good food. I can't remember what we ate, but we ordered like I think we ordered like 10 different things that we all shared. But Maine is really cool. Erie has a really cool barbecue spot. It's like a hole in the wall barbecue spot. I don't even remember what it's called. Um, the circuit for the G League is like hit or miss. Like Wisconsin, it's not it.
Oshkosh,
Yeah,
Wisconsin.
nothing in Wisconsin. New York is always cool to go to. We usually go into the city when we do that. Um, yeah, I think those are the main ones. I think the best one for me is Maine because there's just so many restaurants, and every time we go, we always go to a new one.
Yeah, the G League bubble the G League circuit is interesting because there are not very many major cities, right? The Westchester, New York
Hmm.
is, outside and you're 50 minutes or 40 minutes into, Manhattan. I think that's what makes the 905 great is that you're in Mississauga, you're right beside Toronto, but Mississauga's big too, right? Like it's not a small town. It's not Oshkosh, Wisconsin. No
Yeah,
offense to Oshkosh, but it's a very tiny, tiny town. So a little bit different and not as many options for sure.
I wanted to ask, in my experience as a former athlete, I never had to question about, or even never even crossed my mind about diversity within the athletic training world. And it's something that's been obviously very much talked about this past year and a half, given everything that has happened. But I wanted to kind of hear your thoughts on your experience being somebody who has a diverse background clearly, and working within this field.
You know what? For me, fortunately, I haven't had any bad experiences. I think just me being in Toronto maybe is probably the reason why that happens. It's just super multicultural, and I feel like we're seeing way more practitioners of color, and yeah, like I haven't per se had any issues. Neither have I come across any colleagues of mine who've had any issues within the field, which is great to hear that in our field that's not a concern or issue. Maybe people do in a clinical standpoint where people don't want to be seen by someone in particular, but um, yeah, I haven't had any issues and people have been really pleasant.
It's kind of funny because it's something that I like literally just crossed my mind now because it's something that I don't even think of when of like, oh, there's inequality or something like there, because like I've personally never had a bad experience with anybody, and the athletic trainers that I've been always surrounded by were multiple different backgrounds, and it
Yeah.
was great. Like I've never had to, the fact that I never had to consciously think about it was just tells you how comfortable the setting and the environment really is. And you're right, Toronto is, I believe I read somewhere recently, it's the most diverse city in the world.
Wow.
So it speaks to exactly the environment that the Toronto Raptors foster as well.
Yeah, no, it's like you said, I don't think I haven't come across anyone who said, I don't want to go to this massage therapist because they are from wherever. Like I've never heard that. I think it just comes down to skill set more so
Yep,
than color.
yep, agree.
Is it talked about in your field? Because obviously there's issues of systemic barriers, inequities in healthcare. That's like an obvious one, but just specific um, to your field, is it even talked about? Is it something that comes up? Is it sort of, or are we all just kind of working? Because I agree with you. I tend to agree that Toronto allows you to sometimes to not see it, right? Because there's
Yeah.
on every corner there's somebody from a different country, right? If you live out in Niagara where I stay, that's not the case, so you're a little more aware of it, right?
Yeah.
So um but is it talked about? Is it something that, although it may not be in your face, is it discussed? Is it something that we're conscious of, aware of? Is it discussed in any way?
You mean like just as a discussion?
Just as a discussion, as something as that we need to be aware of in your field, because we can't assume it doesn't exist. We just have
Yeah.
to our own experiences sort of tell us what we know about it, right?
Yeah. I you know, our I can talk about our medical staff and the Raptors organization as well. We'll openly have discussions about it, and I think Charles, you've been a part of some of them as
Sure.
well, where they make an effort to discuss this, to make a um, to allow people to give them that opportunity to speak out loud. And if they ever had to deal with it, it's an opportunity for us to kind of discuss and openly communicate. Um, but I can't really speak on on the profession itself or like in a clinical base. I have never been in a clinical setting where that was discussed. This is my first time being a part of like a organization or a company like MLSE, where I've gotten the opportunity to be a part of something and also, share my thoughts and communicate with others.
So, question for you about the young up and coming therapists,
Hmm.
because it's ultra competitive, right? Like, I mean, there's only so many teams. There are a lot of sports, but if we're just speaking to basketball, there's only so many, and in every sport, there's only so many teams. Um, what advice do you give? Because Steph said it. Your applying on Indeed is like mind blowing. Like that just does not happen for these types of jobs, and so um, I don't think they posted. I don't know if they posted Gemma, and shout out to Gemma with the Golden State Warriors now,
Yep.
but I don't think his job was posted on Indeed.
Yeah,
And
no.
so, and so, um, talk about for those coming up, what can they do? Because we don't want them to be discouraged. There's a lot of great value and opportunity in the field, and how do they sort of navigate it? What's your best advice for navigating your space?
I think the biggest piece of advice I give everyone is to network as much as you can. And it's as easy as sending LinkedIn messages. And with social media being such a huge like platform, I I think we should use it to our benefit and reach out to people, because you'd be surprised on how many people actually respond. Um, if I go on my LinkedIn and I get messages, I'll respond to a lot of people, or as many as I can, and help in whatever way I can, whether it's to hop on a call or if they have the ability to come in and shadow for a day. Um, I will say that because I was once in that position and I was seeking for guidance or help, and I was offered it. So I'm willing to kind of give it back. And I think a lot of healthcare providers were always in that position where they were working towards something and somebody helped them out. So I don't think anybody's going to not message you back, especially if you're looking for just advice or whatever it may be.
Looking back though at younger Rayhan, who was just Googling, what can I do to be involved at the NBA? How would he feel if this current version of you told him what you're doing now?
Oh, I wouldn't believe him. It's crazy. It's crazy to think, because I remember I was watching TV, and I was sitting with my mom, and I told my mom, I'm like, oh, I'm gonna work for that team one day, and she's like, yeah, you will. And she's like super supportive, but she's probably like, what's this guy thinking?
Oh, I love that. I love that. Oh my God. Like, shout out to the parents, even though if they don't even quite or fully believe it to themselves, they
Yeah.
still put that in your head and you're like, yeah, well, I can do it. Of course I can. So that's amazing. I love that. I love hearing that. Charles, I'm all out of questions. How about you?
Yeah,
Got
I
more in the
just want.
bank?
I got so many. I got so many stories. What's your favorite? Just share your favorite road story with us,
Favorite road story. Um,
because we have a lot of stories,
yeah,
most
we
of
have
which
a
we
lot of
can't
stories.
share, but there's some stories. So why don't you give our 905 listeners a story? I can
Uh,
tell you one story very quickly where I was left on an airport floor, sick on the road, and not looked after by Rayhan. But that's not the one I want to share. I want you to give
well,
them
why
your
why don't you
favorite
give
story.
me some context to like what kind of story you want me to share? Because I got lots, you know me.
So how about funny moments in game?
Funny moments in game. Okay, so Charles and I sat beside each other. So Charles was the lead assistant coach. I sat front bench. He sat next to me. Throughout the game, my responsibility was to give Charles the amount of timeouts, whether guys had fouls, team fouls, and everything else. Um, Along with that, I also spoke to Charles about, players' attitudes or behaviors on the court. And it was nothing against them, but we had one athlete who sprinted down, like he would get off and sprint all the way down every time. And I would always tap Charles on the leg and be like, "Oh, watch it sprint. How fast do you think he's gonna go?" And we would just like talk about like random things. And honestly, it made the game so much more fun that way.
What do you mean he sprinted? Like he went like when he was
Like,
playing or like
no,
Savanna, Usain Bolt?
yeah?
Usain Bolt.
like
What?
off the court, high five to the head coach and sprint down. Yeah,
Wow.
It was pretty
Wow.
funny.
Okay. He was not
a
having
little
it. He's
odd,
like, I'm
but
out.
yeah.
The things that you see and pay attention to sometimes. Um, Rehan, thank you very much for your time. It's really a pleasure. I'm glad people got to know you. Those that heard the banter, we love this man. He's a really good individual, and caring and smart and capable, and competent, and all the rest. And so, really look forward. One, wish you all the best, and two, look forward to continuing to follow your career as you go further and further onto your NBA destination. Thank you again.
Yeah, thank you guys for having me. It was a pleasure.